All right, well, welcome back to the Inkwell Lounge. Today, I want to look at something that is being introduced in Winterspell, the Underdog mechanic.
There's no need to fear. Underdog is here.
No, not that Underdog. So, if you played any amount of Disney Lorcana, you know that going first it's a massive advantage, right? In my opinion, it basically feels like if you lose the dice roll, you're already playing from behind before you even draw your first hand. So the basic idea behind Underdog is that it gives player 2 a little bit more of an advantage than if it was just a normal kind of, okay, here's one ink, here's a one drop, going back and forth, because obviously player 1 really sets the tempo there. So there's similar catch-up mechanics like this in other games, Magic, Pokemon, so it's not really a problem that's limited to just Lorcana. The whole player 1 sets the tempo, player 2 is basically playing catch-up the whole time. So Ravensburger knows this, and in Winterspell they're introducing this Underdog mechanic to kind of help balance out the scales a little bit. But is it going to work? Is it going to just be another mechanic that kind of gets lost in the shuffle, and is it really impactful? Well, okay, let me break down exactly how it works, and we'll see if this is kind of the fix that we've been looking for. All right, so first off, what is Underdog? So let's talk about what the mechanic actually does. Like I mentioned, it does help player 2 kind of have a little bit of an advantage where they didn't before. So it's pretty straightforward, which is kind of nice. Lorcana has always been focused on making sure that the things that it introduces, the mechanics and everything, are pretty approachable, pretty easy to understand. Now, I will say this. If you look on these cards, there is not actually something that says Underdog on the card. It's just the kind of the name of the mechanic, but it is this one thing that all of these cards share in common, the new cards that are being introduced in Winterspell. Now, there's one of these cards for each ink, so it kind of spreads out the ability and, gives each of the inks kind of a little bit of an advantage for the second player. So, if you do look at the card, though, it has the text, if this is your first turn and you're not the first player, you pay one ink less to play this character. So, as you can tell, this gives player 2 the advantage of being able to play a 2-drop character because they're all 2-drop inkable. It gives them the advantage of being able to play that character on their first turn. Now, right now, a lot of these cards don't have any on-play actions, any of them don't have on-play actions. They have some special abilities that kind of relate to the ink that they're in and some differing stats between them. But on the whole, there's no advantage other than you get to pay one less ink. Now, the tricky part is, you'll notice that part of the phrase, on your first turn, or if this is your first turn. So the only time that this is a benefit to you as player 2 is your first turn after player 1. So after that, these characters just become kind of solid bodies. They're good. They're what you kind of would expect from a 2-cost character. But then you lose that after the fact. And so even if you get it later on in the game, you still don't get the whole pay one less for this character. So this kind of gives player 2 a way to cheat that ink curve a little bit. You're getting to put a stronger body on the board immediately, like your first turn. So it's nice. It kind of helps the second player regain some of the tempo. They have something that's a little bit bigger than most of the 1-drops that are going to be out there. A lot of the 1-drops, are like 1-2 or 3-1 or, little things like that can be taken care of pretty easily. But if you're both playing these 1-drops, then they're relatively comparable. So the Underdog mechanic lets you put these bigger cards out there. They're a good cost reduction. And I think it's going to be a good thing for the game. I think in the long run, when they start expanding this out, which I have no doubt that they will, from just these first 6 characters, when they start expanding it out to other cards and other abilities, there could be some interesting things that come out of it. I think that might possibly be why it's not an actual mechanic, like a named mechanic in the game, because they want to have the flexibility of being able to introduce it in other places and not have it locked to just the, okay, this is just when you play this character on your first turn as player 2 kind of thing. It's still going to give you that advantage, but it might come with other advantages as well. Like, if you do play it that way, then you get to do this, add damage to another character, or, there's all sorts of possibilities there. So let's talk about why this is necessary at all. So the win rates for Lorcana, it's very, very evident that whoever goes first, the first player, wins a lot of the time. Now, obviously, that depends on the skill of the players and the decks that they're playing. If one's playing an aggro style deck, then they could potentially just outrun the other one, even if they're the second player. But a lot of times, more often than not, if you are going first, you're the one setting that pace. You play a card, the ink dries, you quest. If you go second, you're constantly trying to play catch up. This is something that the community's been pretty vocal about, honestly. It's, it's a great game, but there are, small problems with it, and this is one of them, right? You can always see those statistics floating around where first player was winning just significantly more. So hopefully this will bring a little bit more balance to the game and kind of help not get rid of, because it won't completely get rid of it, but help kind of minimize the impact of the whole coin flip problem, right? If you're the second player, having to play catch up the entire time is not fun, right? Now, we've seen similar kind of catch-up mechanics in other cards before. We had the Webby Vanderquack, the junior prospector that lets you catch up on ink. And then we had the Clarabelle, which, lets you catch up on your hand size. The problem with those is that, they require that you have the characters on board. They take a little while to kind of build up the necessary pieces of it to get you to that point. Whereas this is just a card in every color that has that text that lets you play it for cheaper on that first turn after. Only the first turn, which is really tricky, because then if you end up with it on turn 10 or later in the game, it's just basically kind of a solid 2-drop character, which is not terrible. It could have been, it could have been really interesting, could have been worse. But, I saw the article on the Disney Lorcana website from Lucas Litzinger, one of the game designers for Disney Lorcana. So he talked about it and talked about how, they kind of tried to think through how they could help out that second player. And then what they kind of landed on was this: you get a little bit more powerful character for cheaper and not for free on your second, if you're going second. Now, if it had been the whole for free kind of thing, I think it would have just absolutely shaken things up like crazy. And this kind of mechanic and these cards would see so much more play. As it stands right now, not 100% sure how much they're going to be introduced into the meta and into decks. But we'll see. We'll give it time. Winterspell is still 2 weeks away right now. So it's all just theory. It's all just people brewing decks and trying them out and testing this mechanic and seeing just how helpful it is. So let's look at the cards themselves. Like I mentioned, there's 6 of them. 7 if you count Judy Hopps' epic that she got. But it's the same card. It's just an epic. So there are one of these in each of the ink colors. They're all 2 cost, and they're all inkable and uncommon cards. Now, they do come with other special benefits that kind of match the kind of the traits, the identity of the ink color that they're in. So, for example, first one, Amber gets Angel, Siren Singer. So whenever it drops, it's 2/2, and you automatically have Singer 3 on the board, which is great because then you have that ready and set to go for the next turn. Whereas you would potentially have to wait extra turns to get something that can sing a 3-cost song. Matches up with Amber's singing abilities just perfectly. So the next one is in Amethyst. It's Christopher Robin joining the fun. So he's a 1/3, but he quests for 2. So he's got a little bit of an extra advantage there, and gives you a little bit extra oomph right there at the start. It's kind of like playing like a Chernobog's Followers, but it actually has, something like it's got the 1-3 stats. And so it could potentially help out if something comes after it on the next turn or later turns. Just a little bit. So next in Emerald, we have White Rabbit, Late Again. So it's a 2/2, and true to Emerald, it has evasive, which would be huge for the first turn to already have an evasive out. Now, he only quests for 1, but still, if your opponent doesn't have anything to take care of evasives right off the bat, you're just questing a couple of times with him before anything potentially is out there to take care of it. For Ruby, we have Liquidator Iced Over. So this one is a 4/2 and has Reckless. Now, perfectly matches up with Ruby, right? Ruby wants to attack. It wants to go after the opponent's characters, which is perfect because then all of a sudden on your first turn, you have something with 4 strength that just basically can go after whatever. Now, you have to be careful because the downside is that 2 willpower. And so, if you do go after something with this Liquidator, then chances are, even if you're hitting against a 1-drop on the other side, probably going to get taken out. So it might be something that you could potentially be a little bit more careful with. But since he does have Reckless, it forces you to attack the opponent on their next turn once they quest with something. So the next one up is in Sapphire. It is Splatter Phoenix, Rejected Artist. Now, this one has actually kind of 2 things that it has going for it that are a little bit extra. So it quests for 2, which is always nice early on, and it has Ward. So, this can help potentially protect that character a little bit more. Obviously not going to protect it from challenging, but any of those kind of early on songs, it can help keep it a little bit safe at least. And the quest for 2 is super nice to have early on and really get that boost before things start getting settled. And last but not least, we have Judy Hopps in Steel, the one that got the epic. Judy Hopps, Snowball Patrol. Now, she is a 2/2, and predictably for Steel, she ended up with Resist 1. So it's awesome to see all these cards and how they, even though they're kind of the same and they all use this same Underdog mechanic, that they are a little bit more customized to the ink that they live in. It's really cool to see, especially like, the choices around which ones get the quest for 2 kind of balances out with some of the stat lines that they have. Like, like Christopher Robin, he's a 1/3, but he quests for 2. So, you kind of lose a little bit because he's got that low strength on him. Hopefully this, like I said, is just the start. I hope to be able to see more of this Underdog mechanic expand out in the future. I think it's interesting that they didn't actually name the mechanic for it. I think it's probably going to be named like in the rules documents and everything, but on the cards themselves, it's just the phrase, if this is your first turn and you didn't go first on it. I think there's all sorts of possibilities where they can expand this out. We saw whenever Shift was introduced, it was just kind of the basic, you can shift this onto this character for a lower cost than just playing the character right out. And then as time went on, we got to see other abilities kind of stacked on top of that. So there are some cards now that when you shift the card, it says if you used Shift to play this, then you get to do something else. I think that's probably going to be the way that it is with this Underdog mechanic. I think in the future that they will figure out a way to work it into other cards so that you see those, those strong cards or a little bit stronger cards, at least for turn 1, come out early. And then they have other abilities that say, maybe it's, when you play this on your first turn, exert chosen character, which would be kind of crazy for, for a small, 1 to 2 drop character like this. But then that also gives you a little bit extra advantage, and, maybe that's Ruby or something. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and how we get it in future sets. So I think it's a step in the right direction. They're great on turn one for player two, but you know then after that they kind of lose their value. But I think that is what's going to kind of keep this as they expand it out to other abilities, other card types, and everything. I think that limitation of it only works on your first turn if you're going second kind of thing, that really kind of locks it down, right? And keeps that power creep down a little bit, so that if they do introduce it in the future and they have an ability with it, then it's not just, oh, every time I play this card, I get that ability. Or I could see them doing something in the future where, if this is your first turn as player two, you get to play it for one less. If it's later on in the game and you didn't do that, then it has another ability that's attached to it. Maybe just as simple as like draw a card. They've been introducing so many other new characters, with the current set, and even some of the ones that they've revealed in Winterspell, where they have multiple options right on one card. It's like, when you play this card, you can either gain one lore or draw a card, or but you have to pick from those options. I'm wondering if they're going to do something similar with the underdog mechanic, where you have to pick between how you potentially use the card. So the only thing that you really have to think about though in using these cards is how to build your deck, right? It's one thing to say, oh, these are great because they let me cheat out a stronger character one turn earlier, basically. But then you also have those cards in your deck that only work 50% of the time, right? Or 50-ish, I guess. Because you're not always going to be going second. Now, you can, even if you win the dice roll, you can say, no, I'm going to go second. But I don't feel like these cards are powerful enough to really make that choice. Now, granted, somebody could come up with a big combo kind of thing, and it could be an amazing combo that works together with one of these cards, and the fact that it's out earlier, like something with Angel with the Singer 3. I could see that being a pretty huge advantage, if you know for sure what your opponent's playing, and maybe it's the third round, and you try to figure out, okay, now I'm going to play this as on my first turn as player two versus saving it for later in the game. So you have to think about the balance on that. You've got your two ink colors. You have to decide if you want to play, 4 of the underdogs in both ink colors or just one color. Honestly, I think the way that the cards are right now, these 6, that I think putting in 8, 4 in each color, way too much. I think it's just going to not be enough of a benefit in the long run to have these where they're taking up these 2-drop spaces in your deck. Obviously it depends on the deck. It depends on how you want to structure it. Maybe these are the only 2 drops that are in there. And just have them in there, but you only get that benefit half the time ish. So it'll be interesting to see how these decks, start coming out once Winterspell gets a little bit closer. We're, again, about 2 weeks away at the time of this recording. So it'll be interesting to see what new decks are put out there. We've already started seeing some people posting new decks because Dreamborn has already put in, I think, almost all the cards now, because all the reveals are done. They put them in there, so people are already kind of brewing and working on things. Now, there's no cards in hand, but some people are making the proxies and trying it out with friends. And I have no doubt that some of the bigger teams out there are already testing all these decks, trying to figure out if these underdog cards are worth including, and potentially how many of them. So that's basically the underdog mechanic. I just wanted to take a little time to talk about it. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it impacts the meta, if it does at all. Or if this is one of those things that is introduced in a set and then really takes kind of a little bit of extra time to build up to where it's a really useful kind of mechanic. So let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear what y'all think about this, to see if you have any ideas for where it might go in the future, or what kind of abilities you could potentially, trigger with it when it's played. There's all sorts of possibilities. It's the same way with any new mechanic that's introduced. There's always a version of it when it first comes out, and then it evolves over time as the game evolves, and as you start seeing other mechanics that can potentially, interact with it, and make it even more powerful in the future. So yeah, leave some thoughts in the comments. I really appreciate it. And thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you're not already. Like the video, all that kind of good stuff. I really appreciate it. It really helps me out as a small content creator, kind of grow the channel. So yeah, I look forward to seeing your ideas. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.